The days are getting longer and the temperatures are slowly getting warmer. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Welcome to the Something in the Air podcast, brought to you by the Press of Atlantic City. We do this in conjunction with Stockton University. New episodes the first and third Wednesdays of every month. And join with me, as we do at the beginning of every month, New Jersey State Climatologist based at Rutgers University, Dr. Dave Robinson. Dr. Robinson, we're recording this on April 1st, and no April Fool. We saw a little bit of snow today in some parts of the state.
A little bit, more than we saw in the entire month of March, yet it only amounted to a couple of tenths of an inch up above about 1,500 feet in the northwest part of the state. It accumulated, if you'd call it that. Flurries were seen at lower elevations, but again, we didn't see that much in the entire month of March. So there we are, a little cold shot, and then it looks like that's going to be it for at least a week. Even precipitation, you know that.
Yeah, I do. And by the time this drops, which will be on April, where am I looking at? April 7th, we're going to be in the midst of quite a number of days dry here in South Jersey. So it does look like the middle part of the month, maybe one last cold shot. But by and large, we are saying goodbye to winter pretty quickly here. You know, we talk about snow here. And like you said, April Fools, we got no snow in March. We got a little bit in April here. You know, northern half of the state, I mean, I was telling people earlier today, that's not really a big deal. And even down south, it snowed in April a little bit, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is not all that unusual. And we go through Aprils without any snow, but to see measurable snow anywhere in the state in April, especially the first 10 days, once you get past the 10th or 15th, you have to kind of look to the northwest part of the state. And there have been some memorable snows up there. I mean, really deep plowable snows up to about April 20th and even a little bit later into the month. So you can put away your shovels once you get past the middle of April for sure.
It's also opening day, you know, on April 1st today here. So we had a couple of rainouts across MLB, although I know you're now again, this is dropping on April 7th, but your Yankees didn't pick up the first W today against the Blue Jays.
It is late afternoon, and you're lucky that I'm talking to you because I'm not pleased at all.
Oh.
And it has to do with the stupid new major league rule of starting someone at second base in extra innings. Don't get me started with that. I'm a baseball purist, except an American leaguer, so not the pitcher batting.
Right. Well, I hear you. I actually agree with you. I don't like that runner starts on second rule. I think what Major League Baseball has not figured out is that it's the commercials that are taking up all this time. It's not the play on the field, and either they know it and don't want to admit it, or they just don't know it. But I don't think putting a runner on second to start off the 10th inning is a good thing to do.
No, it is not good at all. And I saw it break up a perfect game in the Atlantic League game last year up here in Somerset, which is now a Yankee AA team. The Somerset pitcher had a perfect game after 9 innings, and they pulled him in the 10th, started a runner at second base for the away team. That runner scored. They never scored. Game over. Lost.
Yeah.
It's like going from here, boom, down into nothing. I don't care what team you're rooting for. It's a horrible rule.
Let's not start off with the numbers question here. Let's talk about March, right? Because, March, everyone said, comes in like a lion, goes out like a lamb. And, I get comments on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. That's at AC Press Martucci on Twitter, at Joe Mark WX for Instagram and Facebook. But people are saying, oh my God, I need all the kind of clothes for March, sandals, sweaters, whatever. So why is it that March does have this kind of feel? What is going on in the climate, or what's going on with our atmosphere during this time?
One word, transitional. It is a transitional season, just as we see a very turbulent October sometime, as summer's trying to hang on, but it can actually snow, and certainly you can get an early season nor'easter. It's the same as when we get into March and April. You have to remember the sun is as strong in March as it is in September, much milder in September than March. It hasn't warmed up yet. You've got winter still parked to your north, yet it's greening up in the south in spring and early summer like conditions actually beginning. So we're in that squeeze play. And from one day to the next, even within the days, you can have a really pronounced changes. And because you've got that cold to the north and increasing warmth to the south, it leads to a more dynamic situation as well. So it's got all the ingredients to be a really active, turbulent month. And, this month, we already said, didn't have any snow. It didn't have, we'll talk, I know in a little while about why the first half of the month was pretty dry. The second half was wet, but there's one word that besides transitional that sums up this past month of March was wind. And that comes when you have all these strong systems moving through the eastern United States with your pressure gradients building and an awful lot of wind. And that was certainly the case this March.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about winds. It was a good month for winds if you like the winds, bad if you did it, but there were a number of windy days. But yeah, let's talk about precipitation here. So, March came in like a lion and ended like a lion, but it was a big lamb in between. So the first day of the month, we had rain, but then we went dry from the 2nd to the 16th, and then we had rain on the 16th, 18th, 19th, 24th, 28th, and 31st at Atlantic City International Airport. So some numbers that I had, and I was geeking out over this. So Atlantic City International Airport and the marina had a 14-day dry streak. That was the longest dry streak in March's history. That was solely within the month of March. So you have to put the qualifier there, but the longest dry streak within the month of March. You want to talk about that? That's pretty cool.
I'm impressed you came up with that statistic. No,
I remember really we were texted back and forth about this, I think.
Yeah, a little bit. There have been longer dry periods. We know that at other times of the year. It's tough to get that in the month of March because you do have that transition, that back and forth pattern, and with that, storms moving across the country. So it is difficult to stay that dry for that long. We saw very dry, but it's very interesting. We saw a dry January, then we had storm after storm in February, and then it took a break, kind of inhaling and exhaling. And then we got into a pretty good storm pattern the last 2 weeks of the month. So that's just the way the weather winds blow, if you will. But to keep it really bone dry for that long a period of time is kind of unusual. And as we saw, a little bit worrisome when it came to the brush fires that erupted.
Yeah. We had the one that made news, of course, was the one in Lakewood where 170 acres burned. And if you were on the Parkway up that way and exit 88 to 98-ish, you weren't going anywhere on that one Sunday because it was blocked off because of the brush fire. But, going back to the all-time records, I had to laugh because I was like, I wonder where this ranks in history. So there's a website that we use, it's called XMASIS, where I can find that. So I look at the top 10 and it's not in the top 10. I'm like, all right, no problem. I look at the top 20, it's still not there. I'm like, well, okay, what the heck? So it turns out that 14 days in a row was only our 72nd longest dry streak at the airport, and records go back to 1948. And at the marina, our 129th longest or dry 129th longest dry streak, and that goes way back to 1873. So March is just some really low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it was pretty easy to snatch that record away. It's funny you say that because here in New Brunswick, we had 2 record high temperatures this past March, and they were both really weak former records, and that goes back a century, but they were records nonetheless for that day. But we call them politely weak records.
Weak record. I call it pipsqueak records, and I know what you're talking about because we had that last Friday in March where we broke the record. I'm going to talk about that on the other side. But yeah, we're just collecting all the low hanging fruit this month. We collect the precipitation low hanging fruit, the temperature low hanging fruit. It's still fruit. It's still good, right?
Well, you got to fill in those little holes now. Now we have another 80-degree record high in late March. Instead of in New Brunswick, it had been 76. We broke it by 6 degrees.
Right. So let's talk about that wildfire. Let's just talk about wildfires this time of year. Like we said, the Lakewood wildfire was the big one for the month. We had some other smaller ones. But how concerned or not concerned are you about wildfire season as we go into April and May this year. We have the very strong sun, as you pointed out, and we did have that long dry streak during the first half of March.
Yeah. You can't let your guard down in the spring. You absolutely can't, because you've got that stronger sun. You don't have the grasses and the deciduous trees, and even your pines really greening up, and photosynthesis kicking in, and water being pumped up into the trees and into the grasses. You've got all that debris that died off, dropped off trees and whatever from last fall. So you don't have the shade on your forest floor, and your brushy areas haven't gotten moist enough yet. What else? I mentioned the sun. You can get the wind. That can dry things out pretty quickly. And you can ramp up the heat a little bit. So all those ingredients are there. So it is fire season in the pinelands, and even in any grassland areas. It doesn't mean we don't have fires other times of the year. Well into the summer, if it particularly gets quite dry. But it's really, the recipe is there in the spring if you go. And that's why I'd say a week from now, if we don't see more rain, despite the rain we had to end March, it's going to dry out pretty quickly. And also, let's not forget, the pinelands soils are very sandy, so they dry out quickly. So all the ingredients are there. What we hope for is it doesn't get too warm and it doesn't get too windy. And then you hope for occasional rains. And that's what we're not seeing for the next week or 10 days. And even the temperature's starting to edge up to be above normal. So really, really keep your guard up in the first half of April. I'm not saying it's just staring us right in the face, but it looks like the potential is going to be there for more brush fires. And if you look to the 14th of March, where we had those fires, it was a mild day. It wasn't particularly warm, but it was really windy. And as you already pointed out, it hadn't rained in almost 2 weeks. So there we were. You just needed something to set it off. And you had that fire there. You had a pretty good smoky one that showed up on radar down in Salem County. That was more impressive on radar, picking up the smoke, than the Lakewood fire. But the Lakewood fire was much more dangerous threat to structures and to individuals.
Hey, I'll tell you about radar. There was a prescribed burn that was done by the Forest Fire Service in Galloway, and this thing blew up on radar. I mean, it looked bigger than the one in Lakewood, the one in Salem County. It was just like an explosion on radar. And, it was over in Forsyth. And if you know Forsyth, it's pretty low lying. So you could just see the fire for miles away. I mean, we had a drone in Pleasantville about 7 or 8 miles away. You just see a whole land burning. So you can see those on radar. And, we hope when we are seeing them on radar, they're prescribed burns and not the uncontrollable wildfires. But, let's turn over to precipitation real quick. We got about a minute and a half left in this segment. We didn't get any snow, but where did we wind up precipitation wise across the area? And I'll just say, we only had 7 days of rain at Atlantic City International Airport, but 3 of those were above an inch.
Yeah, when it rained, it wanted to rain. And the southeast portion of the state, it's happened a couple times in recent months, came out the winner. It was definitely the wettest part of the state. It looks like the state as a whole is going to come out a little bit below average for the month of March, not exceedingly so. But, looking at our COCORAs, our volunteer network, a station in Linwood caught 6.44 inches of rain. That's more than 2 inches above normal. And the driest station was Hamilton at 4.99. So well above normal in Atlantic County. Cape May was 6.1 at Sea Isle City for the high, and Lower Township was an ample 4.92. I'll give you 2 more. In Ocean County, Berkeley Township came in at 4.24. You're starting to see a drop off as you move away from the southeast. And Jackson Township, a little, but that was the wettest. In Jackson Township, 3.82 was the driest. So ample rain, particularly in the southeastern part of the state.
Yeah, it definitely was different elsewhere than it was here. That's for sure. All right, we're going to take a brief break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about temperatures. We're talking about winds, and we'll talk about some other good stuff as we go into April. This is the Something in the Air podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to the Something in the Air podcast. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci. Joined with me, New Jersey State Climatologist Dr. Dave Robinson. Dr. Robinson, you were singing a little bit during the intermission here. You want to tell us what that was about?
Yeah, I'm sure not going to sing for you, but the wind. I was picking up a theme for this month's or March's report that I write and post on our website, and wind was going to be the key. And I was testing you, saying, if I entitled it, Everyone Knows It's, would you know, Windy? And you don't know that song. You're too young. So that was a good test. Maybe I won't call it that.
So who's it by?
Thanks. I should have Googled it. Associate. No, it's not the association. It's not Fifth Dimension. Is it the Fifth Dimension?
Fifth Dimension. I've heard of Fifth Harmony.
Now you got me going. I don't know. But it was a well-known song for those in my generation.
Right, just slightly older than me, very slightly.
Let's
talk about the wind. We'll talk about the wind. It was pretty windy this month. Yeah. I mean, there were 5 days at the Atlantic City International Airport where we gusted over 45 miles an hour, and I like to say 45 because that's where I feel like we start to get into some wind issues, either with power outages or damage. And actually on the second, it got up to 51 miles an hour. So did anything wind-wise, stick out to you in certain locations in South Jersey, or just overall, hey, just a windy month everywhere in the Garden State?
Yeah, I mean, overall, it was a windy month. I mean, when we look at the strongest winds, and we had about 15 days where somewhere in the state gusted over 40 miles an hour. That's just been our threshold. And a good handful, maybe 6-7 days with gusts over 50. And you'll find those either up at our High Point station or up at our Vernon station, the top of Mountain Creek ski area, or down along Delaware Bay and Fortescue or Lower Alloways Creek Township over by the nuclear plant, or up the coast, Atlantic City Marina, Seaside Heights, Seagirt, Harvey Cedars, those stations. Those are areas where they're either at elevation and you get the strongest winds aloft, or down near the coast where you have less topography in their case, but less friction. So the winds blowing off the water tend to be much stronger. So the two ideal places to get strong winds. But we had some inland. When you get a severe storm or something like that, you can spawn 1 or 2 inland as well. So it was windy everywhere. And there were some power outages with some of the wind. There was some damage. A week ago, a couple days ago, a roof off a hotel up in Neptune. I saw a friend had some siding blow off a neighbor's home up in Northwest Jersey. And they came from all directions. We had strong southerly winds. We had strong northeasterly winds. We had strong northwesterly winds. So there was no bias in what direction the winds were coming in strong in March. A really active, a lot of air blew through the state in March, put it that way.
It wasn't hot air, though.
Well, on a couple occasions it was, because we had one really windy, warm day.
Yeah, in the figurative sense, no hot air for us in New Jersey.
Oh, well, you and I supply enough of that.
Oh, okay. All right. See, I'm trying to pump us up. I'm trying to make us look good. You're just, you're taking down the temperature. You're checking my ego at the door. All right. Speaking of winds, let's talk about the sea breeze, right? Because it is sea breeze season here in South Jersey. And, sea breezes are a way of life here in March, April, May, June, especially when you compare it to the mainland. So, just tell us what sea breezes are. And could you do we'll say a climatology of sea breezes here in the Garden State?
Oh yeah, it's really an interesting phenomenon. A phenomenon. I call it nature's air conditioning. Once you get into the sea breeze season, it's simple physics. Go back to your basic physics. Hot air rises, cool air sinks. That's number one. Nature doesn't like a vacuum. So if you take hot air and raise it off the surface one place, something has to come in to replace it. And that's the whole idea. You heat up your mainland, your inland areas, that air rises and air is cooled over the cooler water bodies, particularly in the spring and the first half of summer. So that rushes in to replace that air that's rising inland. And that's your sea breeze. Now at night, the opposite occurs. It cools off on land and the oceans remain warmer relative to the land when you get to night. And that's when you get land breezes. And that's when you're swatting flies and no-see-ums and whatever along your barrier islands, because they're coming out of the salt marshes. So most people are looking for a sea breeze. But other times, you can at night keep the coastal areas warm with a land breeze. Now, if the winds are blowing from the south or southwest, look to Delaware Bay's Jersey coast for the coolest, particularly Fortescue, for instance, will get that sea breeze. And you may keep the sea breeze at bay along the Atlantic coast.
No pun intended.
Or just on the ocean side of the dunes. That's it. And then if you look at the geometry of the New Jersey coastline, it's more north-south up the coast, but the lower coast is more southwest to northeast trending. So it's hard to get a good sea breeze from Cape May up to Sandy Hook because of the wind directions can influence it on the southern coast versus the northern coast. So it's really an interesting phenomenon that it certainly brings cooling conditions along the coast. But there's another negative to it. When you bring that air in from the ocean, and that can recirculate pollution back onto land, and right along the sea breeze front, you can actually have unhealthy air that can lead to respiratory problems. So that's something people don't think of too much, but that is a known phenomenon with sea breezes. So, and of course, this time of the year, I've literally documented a 90-degree April afternoon inland where it's been 50 degrees along the coast. That's the extreme. 40-degree difference in 30 miles due to that sea breeze.
I remember one day, I think this was in my Rutgers days, where I drove from New Brunswick to Belmar, and it was like 87 degrees, down 18. Okay, you get off Route 18. Now you're east of the Parkway, might be like 85. But like right as soon as you got like into the Belmar's like city limits, town limits, right down. And it was dropping like a degree a second on my car thermometer. So by the time I got to the beach, it was 58 over there. It was just going like I went one block. All right, 62, 61. Then I hit the beach. I'm like, I might as well turn around and go back. But that's what happens with the sea breeze.
That's the danger of having a thermometer in your car. You're so busy looking at the thermometer and not the road. I might add that we actually see it in the Raritan Valley sometimes with an easterly flow. The cooler air comes up Raritan Bay, and it gets cooler as you go from New Brunswick up to Hillsborough and then over to Flemington. It will be warmer as you go inland, and you can see the cold air go right up the valley, and surrounding it, it's warmer. So it is an interesting phenomenon. There are air quality concerns with it. And of course, on that one day I mentioned, you got your heat on along the coast and you got your air conditioning on inland. Now that will moderate when you get to the summer, where the oceans get to 70s and you'll kick in a sea breeze and it'll drop the temperature from the upper 80s to the upper 70s. But still, it's a phenomenon you'll see most of the summer. And oftentimes along your coastal areas, your warmest temperatures of the day will occur before noon. And then the breeze will kick in and knock them down.
Yep. Been there too. All right, so we have about 2 minutes left. I want to get to two things, but the first thing I'll do real quick because I really wanted to geek over this. This was the dew point. You know me, I love dew points. I did research with you on dew points. On March 15th, we had a -3-degree dew point at Atlantic City International Airport at noon. That was the driest dew point this late in the year. And not only that, it was the driest dew point for the month of March. Your reaction?
Another impressive find by you. No, that's just incredibly dry air. In other words, that means you'd have to lower the air temperature to that level to get frost to form. Yet the air temperature was what at the time, 50 degrees or something?
Yeah, it was in the 50s. Yeah.
It's just, and relative humidity, which many people think of, but you and I like the dew point better. Relative humidity was what, about 10% at that time.
Yeah, it was real low.
It was very low, and that's when your fire danger concerns come into play. So you really don't want to see, and that's when you touch anything and you get a shock. And of course, it's a bad hair day too. There's a lot of problems.
Both of us here. Both of our hairs.
Absolutely. Well, just glad to have it. But out in the Western U.S., those dew points are more common, and it's very dry. And that's why they all look wrinkly out in the desert Southwest instead of young and fresh skinned here in the East.
Our beautiful, beautiful silky smooth skin that we have here in New Jersey. Absolutely.
There you go.
All right. We didn't even get to temperatures, and we're almost out of time. Just tell us where we were. I know we were above average for the month of March.
Yeah, a little bit above average, probably in the top 25%, no top 10 ratings. It varied back and forth. We had a couple record-breaking days. We talked about that. It was a pretty warm month overall. We had a couple freezes, unlike last year when Atlantic City Marina only froze on March 1st. It was a little bit colder than that. So nothing excessive, but came out a little bit on the warm side.
Yeah, and want to just talk about that record temperature at the Atlantic City International Airport. We got to 82. The old record was 71, talking about low-hanging fruit. 11-degree temperature difference. That was the largest margin of defeat since February 5th, 1991. I was 6 months. I was in my mom's stomach for 6 months by that point.
You pulled out all the stops this month, coming up with those really interesting weather records. Impressed. You must have been taught well.
I guess. What can I say? No, you did a great job, as did everybody at Rutgers. Always, we love Stockton. Stockton's helping us out here with the shoot. I love Rutgers. Rutgers has my heart for sure. So just tell us where we can find more climate information for the state, and then we'll get up on out of here.
Visit us at njclimate.org for the old long-term climate data and for the latest weather conditions in your neck of the woods, njweather.org.
There you go. He is Dr. Dave Robinson, New Jersey State Climatologist. I'm meteorologist Joe Martucci at the Press of Atlantic City. We will be back with you the third Wednesday of April, and I'm excited for this one. We're talking about weather and hair. Speaking of our beautiful hair that we have, we are having the guy who cuts my hair come on, and he is going to tell me all about weather and hair. So this is kind of self-serving. He's going to give me some good weather tips, or some good hair tips for the weather. But I think it's going to be a fun one. So we'll be back with you third Wednesday of April. We'll be back with Dr. Robinson first Wednesday in May. Till then, stay safe, take care, everybody, and we'll talk to you soon.